All right, cats, it's time to clean this beast. The ladies did a very nice job finishing up the clay, and so now it's time to clean. I like to clean starting from the top, and it's not too bad. This is in real time. I mean, I'll speed it up when you guys are watching it, but you'll get a good sense of how long it takes. And it really shouldn't take long. It is easier if you make the clay well. And this time we made the clay well. It's very nice. So you can see that the walls are not very covered, right? So I can just run the scraper along here. I like to get the dust down from the top and the ridge, right? So it's pretty quick. I'm not scrubbing, I'm not scraping hard. I'm just getting the chunks. It's a clay mixer. We're not going to eat dinner off of it, right? We just don't want to have chunks in the clay for the next person because, we take all that time slopping down the clay, slaking down the clay. That's on your final, by the way, the word slake. Slaking down the clay. We let the clay slake beautifully. Then if we put that nice soft slop on top of a bunch of hard chunks of clay, it's going to affect the quality of our clay body. So, I am wearing my mask when I clean because there's always some powder that lines up around the edges and stuff. You don't want to be breathing that. I'm going to, this pole in the center, there's always a bunch of clay up and under it, right? That stuff. So I'm going to chip that stuff out. And honestly, that's the stuff that winds up in the clay the most often. People forget that area to chip that out, and it's usually pretty loose. And I'm just going to run my hands down that pole to get rid of those chunks, the corners. Generally, if I'm making clay with a partner, which you should always, always, always do, please don't ever make clay by yourself. A, it's a pain. B, it's dangerous. C, lifting those full buckets of slop, even if you're a very strong person, is not good for your body. And D, you want to be sure to get this done in a timely manner. I say it takes about an hour and a half, that's start to finish. But normally, while I am cleaning the clay mixer, somebody else is cleaning the pug mill, right? So even I will, right, if I'm the thrower, which I was in the videos, right? If I'm the person that's putting the clay into the pug mill, I'm done first, right? Because there's about, 100 pounds of clay still in the clay mixer or still in the pug mill when the clay mixer is empty, right? And while the cutter is still cutting. So while the cutter is still cutting, I'll come over and start scraping this out. Then usually by the time the cutter is done sponging down the pug mill, putting the sponge back, all those things, I'm done cleaning. So it's a nice way to get the cleaning done in a timely manner as well. Take a bucket that's dry. I don't want a bucket that's wet because I want to get this all dried out to reclaim. Just going to lift all this out. That's always help. Okay, so I'm going to call that well scraped. So 400 pounds of clay were made, and that's all I had to clean up. Not too bad. Okay, now I've got my bucket and sponge. This black bucket is always there specifically for this. I like to first, again, working top to bottom, I like to first wet this down because this is where I'm going to put the bucket. And I don't want to forget about that part, especially until I'm done, because then I'm going to re-mess up all the nice cleaning that I did. All right, that looks good. Now my bucket goes here, and I'm just going to give a quick swipe to the sides. I've got a really loaded sponge. Quick swipe to the sides. Quick swipe down the metal. Quick swipe on the side. Swipe on the metal. All right, so now I'm just going to wring out the sponge. And now I'm going to wring out the bottom. So just using that wrung out sponge, I can get all the water back out in not that many squeezes. Ooh, hope that didn't just get it. All right, so the pug mill's another issue. Not a bad issue, but it's another issue. Couple of things. They put this up, and I'm gonna talk to them a little bit about how they did it because it's not quite right. So one thing is that the sign is not flipped back over the buttons, and this absolutely needs to be there. The do not push buttons until sponge and plastic are out of the hopper. It's a super easy mistake to make, is that somebody's like, oh, well, should I start it up? And they hit the starter, then the plastic and the sponge gets drawn into the system. It is a real pain to undo. So that's a problem. Also, this is not cleaned off. This is going to be, right, this is on the top of the plastic. This is exposed to air. This is going to turn into dry clay. If you've got dry clay up here, that's going to fall into the clay mixer and make a mess. The other thing is attaching the sponge to the handle, right? You always want to do that so that when a person opens it, they don't have to go searching for this. Sometimes, too, people throw clay into here. And if they don't see the sponge, they'll throw clay on top of the sponge. The sponge gets buried, that's a problem. I'm kind of giving you all the worst case scenarios, but man, they happen. So, before you put up the pug mill, you want to clean this as well. And so long as this clay is still soft, you can scrape this off and just pop it right into the pug mill. It's a perfectly good place for it. It's perfectly good clay. You don't have to do anything special. You also want to get the stuff off the back of here. I should probably check the camera. I really hope you guys can see this. Hold on. Oh yeah, we're good. Okay. Then I'm going to scrape the inside walls because those will also get exposed to air. We don't pack the plastic in here down real hard because, you know, plastic, as much as it's practically permanent, it just pollutes our earth for thousands of years. It's really awful stuff, but it also breaks down, becomes brittle, and starts to fray after a while. And boy, there's nothing like a bunch of frayed plastic in your clay to make your day lousy. So I'm catching these rims, which affect how the pug mill closes. Okay, now I'm going to grab my sponge again. My not very clean sponge right now, but just going to give this a dusting so that I get rid of anything that's crunchy. Crunchy is bad. I'm going to tidy this up a little bit. Move that handle. Again, this clay, if it sits on the outside, it just turns into clay dust. And that is our number one thing that we want to prevent is clay dust anywhere. On the tables, on the floor, on the pug mill, on the clay mixer. Clay dust is not healthy for anybody. So I would call that good. Yeah, that's pretty good. Except I'll do this in a minute, but I gotta get rid of this clay. There we go, get rid of this sponge. And now I'm gonna dunk this sponge. Right, I don't want it full on dripping. Don't want it full on dripping, but if I squeeze it, I want some water to come out. Now I'm going to attach this to the handle. Oops, there's some more. Oops. I'm going to attach this to the handle, and the handle pops out, which is kind of handy. Then that goes that way, right? So now whenever this gets opened, I know where that sponge is. It comes right up to the edge, so it's harder to bury it. And then here's the plastic. It's from the old logo, USI Campus Store. I'm going to just, in the slop sink, I'm going to just run this through the slop sink so it's nice and damp, again, to get any of the crusty off. All right. And then I'm just going to lay this in here on top of the sponge. So the sponge goes down, the bag gets laid on top, and then you let this rest gently. You don't want to cram that down. Again, we don't want to fray that plastic. This tabletop's a mess, so I'm going to grab the sponge. Just do a nice clean on that. go. That looks good. Now this is all softened up a little bit, little once over. And then the last thing, and you probably won't be able to see that without me adjusting the camera, but at the end of the pug mill, there is this little lid that has this green foam in there. It kind of acts like a gasket. You want to dunk this in the clay side of the sink as well. Shake it out before you put it back on the end, because we've got to keep everything in this pug mill damp. There is the vacuum here. Make sure the vacuum lid stays on, otherwise air gets in there and dries that out too. When the clay in the pug mill goes dry, it's a problem, and it requires taking the entire pug mill apart to bust all the clay out. So do everything in your power to keep that happening. So here we have the bin for gold art. If you remember, the gold art is the stoneware clay. Gold art, right? And the gold art comes in the gold bag. Ta-da! So if there's room in the gold art bin, that's where you put it. But in this way, if you're mixing clay and these are completely full, then you don't have to go outside and get full bags from the shed. You can just scoop out of here into the dry bin on the scale, and you can weigh your clay that way. Kind of nice. Right? Or if you get to the end of your batch where you have to go 2 scoops, 1 scoop, you go 2 scoops of fire clay, 2 scoops of stoneware, and 1 scoop of ball clay. You can just scoop them from the bins if you're out. So when you roll a bag, after emptying it, you want to start at the top very gently, because you don't want to breathe in all of that silica dust. And then once you get it sealed at the top, you can usually roll that pretty quickly into a burrito and throw it away. This one is our Hawthorne Bond, which is our fire clay, Hawthorne Bond. You'll notice I'm keeping the bag low, right? I don't want to just like shake it up here, because then again, I'm dealing with silica dust. And sometimes too, if I'm doing multiple bags, I'll just leave that for a minute, let the dust settle before I pull it out. Here's our OM4, which is our ball clay, right? OM4 ball clay. If you ever make a mistake, which happens, right? You guys are new to this. If you ever make a mistake and accidentally put the wrong kind of clay in the wrong bin, no shame, but geez, let me know, okay? Because we don't want to. It sounds like maybe it wouldn't be a big deal, but if the clay gets mixed in a completely wrong ratio, it'll affect how much the clay shrinks, how much the clay cracks, and how plastic it is. So we don't want to mess that up. I'm going to do one quick once over with the sponge for the surfaces, and then we're done. All right, see you later. Have fun. Bye.